Hello, STXi. I am so excited to be here as your guest and be in your home. Before I start, I just want to give a shout out to Marco Silva, who's right back there, who is my friend and who has brought this festival together. This is really an honor to be here. I am Kristin Leong. I'm thrilled to see all of you here today. I'm thrilled to see so many young people here today. I used to be a middle school teacher, so let's go ahead and start with the agenda. There we go. Okay, so we're going to start off. I'm going to tell you guys a little story about the grocery store. I'm going to tell you guys about a couple of different projects I have been working on over the last 15 years. We're going to talk about a few lessons where the projects overlap. I'm going to show you an awkward selfie that was taken before the word selfie was even invented. And then we're going to figure out how we can all stay in touch. You guys ready? Okay. Let's do it. So how many of you actually do your own grocery shopping? Anybody? Okay. Okay, good. So you guys know that when you go to the grocery store, you should probably look your best. You just never know who you're going to run into, right? So this is a story. This is a story about an outfit that I wore to the grocery store one time. Okay, so I was a middle school teacher. When you work with tweens all day, you have to go to yoga after work because it can be a little bit stressful. So I went to yoga after work, but I was unprepared for post-yoga. So this is how I had to go to the grocery store, and all I had with me was sweatpants and my fanciest teacher shoes and this disgusting pink sweaty yoga tank top. And as I was going into the grocery store, I was like, it's fine. This is going to be my teacher athleisure look. I'm just going to be in. I'm going to be out. It's totally fine. As I'm going in, I remember that our grocery stores in Washington are really, really cold. Is that the same here? Really, really cold. So I was I gotta go back to my car. I have to get the only long sleeve shirt that I have, which is my son's thermal, who at the time was 7 years old. I was like, we're just gonna make it work. While I was at the car, I remembered that I love the earth. I don't know if you guys know this, but Seattle is the recycling capital of the world. And I was like, oh, I gotta get my reusable bag, which is this shopping bag that I have been reusing since 2005. And I'm ready to go. I go into the grocery store and it's fine because who cares, right? I'm just gonna be in, I'm gonna be out, I'm grown up, it doesn't matter. I'm doing my shopping and everything is going really well until I'm at the frozen food department and I'm straining to read these labels on frozen chicken because I forgot my glasses, but not my shopping bag. So I'm trying to figure this out when I realized that other people could see me, right? Do you guys ever have that where reality just kind of dawns on you? I was I have to get out of here, and I'm standing there grocery store, holding this frozen chicken with my old shopping bag, wearing my kid's thermal, and I'm how has my life led me to this moment? I am the crazy person in the grocery store. So I'm in the car driving home and I'm laughing out loud to myself. I'm thinking this is going to be an excellent story to tell my family and to tell my students. And so a funny thing happened. Excuse me. A funny thing happened. Excuse me. In the retelling of this story. As I'm going through, piece by piece, this amazing ensemble that I pulled together, I realized that, guys, this wasn't me having a midlife crisis. This was actually my best self. Each part of that outfit represents a part of my life that I love. And here's the thing. When I told this story, one of my 7th graders, they were cheering. They're Ms. Leong, you are a hero. And I get it. Because we tell young people all the time, just be yourself. Express yourself. But here's the thing. The world is a really scary place to be yourself. Especially right now, right? Especially if you're a person of color. Especially if you're a young woman. Or if you're an immigrant. Or you're Muslim, or you're queer, or you're a dreamer, or if there's anybody in your life that you care about that shares any of those identities. But here's what that means. Now more than ever, It is a brave act of rebellion and self-preservation just to be yourself out in public. Let's put that on the screen for all our visual learners. No, go ahead, go back, yeah. Now more than ever, our identities are very, very powerful, which is why I have spent the last year and a half since our last presidential election going around and talking to students and teachers about their identities and inviting them to share them, not only with each other, but with the world. This is my TED-Ed innovation project, roll call. For this project, I have been photographing and interviewing students and teachers from all over the world and asking them 2 questions. 1, what do you have in common with your students or teachers? And 2, does it matter that students and teachers have things in common? Because here's the thing. Right now, it looks like they don't have a lot in common. It looks like students and teachers are looking at each other from across a big, big divide. Roll call is focused on 3 main culture gaps separating students and teachers in our schools: race, gender, and sexual orientation. Let's break that down. Race. Right now in America, the majority of our students are now people of color. Meanwhile, our teachers, 80% of our teachers are white. Where I live in Washington State, 90% of the teachers are white. Let's talk about gender. Of course, about half of our students are boys. This is the same in Texas, in Washington, in the rest of the country. And meanwhile, our male teachers hover around 20 to 25%. In elementary school, that's even lower. If we're going to talk about gender, we should also talk about sexual orientation. It's still really hard to find numbers of how many LGBTQ students or teachers are in our schools. But I know this from experience and also from studies that have recently been released, that now the majority of students are identifying somewhere on a spectrum. In other words, not 100% gay or 100% straight, but somewhere in the middle. And meanwhile, our LGBTQ teachers still don't feel supported enough to be out of the closet. And in some cases, they feel unsafe. That could be for their personal safety, that could be for their job security. So, we have work to do. When I first started this project, Roll Call, I had big dreams. I had hoped that this project would help close the gaps in our schools, that it would somehow find solutions to bring more teachers of color into our schools, that it would find solutions so that our LGBTQ students and teachers would feel more supported. But as I started interviewing actual teachers and actual students about what their experiences are like living these numbers, what I found was that what became really important, the solutions are still important, but that what we really needed to do was humanize the culture gaps separating students and teachers. When you go to rollcallproject.com, here's a little bit of what you will see. You'll see a tab for students and a tab for teachers. At the top of, and you can see their portraits, all of which I have shot over the last year and a half, and you can read their responses to Roll Call's 2 questions. On the teacher side, you can see, here's an example post. This is from North Carolina Regional Teacher of the Year, Anthony Johnson. At the top of their post are a list of identities that those teachers and students have chosen to share in their own words. So Anthony has chosen to share that he has taught for 11 to 15 years. He identifies as African American, male, heterosexual. He was the first in his family to graduate from college, and he is a 5th grade teacher. On the other side, you see Milan. She is a middle school student. She identifies as Chinese and Caucasian. So again, these are all in their own words. So if Milan had said like Asian and white, that's what it would have said. And she identifies as female. You'll notice that for the students, the list of identities are a little bit more brief. I encourage the students, especially our younger kids, like our middle school kids, to keep those brief, to try to respect that perhaps their identities are still evolving. The best way to explain this project is to introduce you to a couple of roll call participants. This is Roberto. We met last year when I went into his South Seattle school to teach a roll call workshop. Roberto was born and raised in Seattle to immigrant parents. He is Mexican American. He is a high school student. He identifies as male, heterosexual, and that he proudly writes on the top of his post that he will be the first in his family to graduate from college. In response to roll call's first question, what do you have in common with your teachers? I'd like to read a little from Roberto's response. He says, growing up, I never had anything in common with my teachers. Being Mexican-American is tough, especially because a lot of us come from families who immigrated to the US. We always had to do the extra set of work and help our parents at their work, and it was that struggle that your teachers didn't understand. When I talked to Roberto about his response, I asked him to tell me more about his life, that he thinks his teachers don't understand, and he told me that here's his schedule every day. He goes to school all day. After school, he goes to work repairing cell phones. After work, he goes to his parents' restaurant to help until the restaurant closes. After the restaurant closes, he goes home, helps get his little siblings into bed, does his homework, and then wakes up the next morning and does it all again. He says that he learned his work ethic from his parents, not from school. In the 11 years that Roberto has been a student in the American public school system, he has had only one Latino teacher who happened to also be Mexican-American. What I love about Roberto's post is he begins by, he is exactly the reason why roll call exists. Because students shouldn't feel like their teachers don't understand them for 11 years of being in our school system. But then he goes on to explain what happened when he did have a teacher who related to who he was and where he came from. He said that one Mexican-American teacher, they shared same taste in music, same taste in... He said that he understood what it was like to grow up as a Mexican-American kid, and that knowing that teacher made him feel less alone, less outnumbered, not only at school, but in the world. Next, I'd like to introduce you to Jill, who's a teacher perhaps like the one that Roberto had. Jill is also a Washington State teacher leader. She's a kindergarten teacher in Auburn. Jill is Peruvian. She was raised by a single mom who immigrated to the United States from Peru when she was in her 20s. Jill was born and raised in Seattle, which is a pretty diverse place. There's lots of different races and cultures. But then when Jill was 12 years old, when she was in 7th grade, she and her mom moved to Puyallup, Washington, which is a rural community, and it is mostly all white. Here's what Jill had to say in response to roll call's first question: what do you have in common with your students or teachers? She wrote about her time as a student. When we moved to Puyallup, it was a whole other world. Everyone was white. Although adults were nice and respectful, the message I got in school here was very different. Kids here had a specific association with Latinos, and it was very negative. So I stopped using Spanish altogether. Especially as a teenager, when it's so important to affirm a child's identity, I wish I had come across adults or students who were curious about my culture. I wish I had come across people who thought it was an asset to speak another language, who expressed positive views about those I identified with. Instead, I worked very hard from 12 to 18 to hide the things about me that made me a Latina so that I could be socially successful in school. The more my mom tried to force me to use Spanish at home, the more I rebelled and refused to use it. I still had a great experience in school, and I can look back on it with fond memories, but I wonder all the time where my language skills would be if I hadn't stopped using Spanish for 6 years. Here's what happened. Jill went to college, went to study to become a teacher. While she was there, her colleagues kept encouraging her to become an ELL teacher because she was bilingual. As I was talking to Jill about this experience, she said to me her first thought was, why would I do that? I have fought so long to become white. I have studied the way my classmates dressed, spoke, how they kept their homes. She said she felt embarrassed that her mom was just like this really loud, short lady, and why couldn't she just be like her other white friends' mothers? She said, I had worked so long to let go, to release of her Latina identity, why would she reclaim it now? So she didn't go into being an ELL teacher. So she went through her master's program, she went into the classroom, and for her student teaching, she was assigned to a 5th grade class. In that 5th grade class, there was a group of girls, Latina girls, who looked a lot like her when she was also 10 years old. And Jill bonded with those kids. And with all of them, it was actually with those girls that Jill started speaking Spanish again, and was inspired to relearn her language, was inspired to relearn about her history, her culture, the country where she's from, and she went on to become an ELL teacher. Here's what she had to say about that. In response to the question, does it matter that students and teachers have things in common? This is what she realized after she became an ELL teacher. I think there's a huge need for bicultural models in my generation and in the generations after. The immigrant generation, our parents, provide guidelines on who we are and where we come from, but are not always able to help their kids navigate in the American world. With this group of 5th grade girls, I felt like I could encourage parts of their identities that made them Latinas, but I could also talk to them about college and careers and parents. What I love about Jill's story is that it's not only that she becomes a bridge now for her students, her kindergarten students, that her students were a bridge for her, back to her own culture. So that this project is not just about bringing in more teachers of color to support our students of color, but that our teachers of color deserve to feel supported and seen as well. Jill is truly bicultural. She is a bridge really between her Peruvian culture and then the white culture where she went to school. She's also bicultural in another sense, which is that her mother is from Peru and her father, who she didn't grow up with, is Mexican. So Jill is bicultural in multiple ways. Does anybody else feel like bicultural is a good fit for them? Anyone else feel like bicultural? Cool. I'm bicultural too. I'm also biracial, which is that my parents are 2 different races. So my father is Chinese and my mother is white. Do we have any biracial people here today? There's one, a couple? Okay, cool. So people often ask me, where did you get the idea for roll call? And I think my idea for roll call has been brewing for a long time, and it's actually rooted in a project I did in 2003 called HALF. So this project was similar to roll call. I photographed and interviewed biracial and bicultural people from all over America. And here we have Micah, who identifies as black and white, Harley, who identifies as Filipino and white, Shakti, who identifies as Moroccan and Yugoslavian, David, who identifies as Chinese and Indian, and Carissa, who identifies as Mexican and white. So similar to roll call, I realized I've been thinking a lot more about HALF lately because of my work with roll call, and I realized I have been cruising around taking pictures of people and asking them awkward questions about who they are and where they come from for a long time. And I realized there are actually some lessons from both projects that feel really, really true today for both. So, number 1, people think that we're not supposed to talk about race or gender or sexual orientation. I found that it's not that these conversations are awkward and frightening, that people actually really want to share about who they are and where they come from, but that we lack enough safe spaces and communities for people to have those conversations. My hope is that roll call is one of those communities where those conversations can happen. Number 2, the portraits are really powerful. The data is shocking. When we find out that the majority of our students are kids of color, and yet 80% of our American teachers are white, that's insane. But here's the thing, until we actually tie those statistics to the actual people who are living those numbers, the kids in our schools, the teachers in our schools, it means nothing. The portraits are a huge part of that. We have to figure out how to look at people in the face and realize that these stories are actual human beings behind these numbers. Number 3, this has been the most powerful lesson for me of all. So when I first started doing HALF, what I arrived at the end of that year, after interviewing and photographing biracial and bicultural people, I realized that a lot of people felt like I had felt growing up, also biracial, also bicultural, which is that we kind of fit in everywhere, but nowhere. So in other words, when I'm in Hawaii, where I'm from, I feel too white. Right? And when I'm in Seattle, where my mother's family is from, I definitely don't feel white enough. And it's this feeling of kind of being able to move around, but never really belonging anywhere. When I started teaching middle school, I realized my students, regardless of their race or culture, felt the same. That as middle school students, they were neither little children anymore, but they weren't young adults. They were kind of able to go back between both worlds, but they really didn't belong to either. In the last year of doing roll call and interviewing almost 200 students and teachers for this project, I realized that regardless of people's race, regardless of their grade or their age, that everybody at some point in their life has felt like the only something in the room. I definitely felt like that a lot when I started doing this work 15 years ago for half. Here was me then, here's me now. When I look at these pictures, there's 15 years between these two pictures. I was such a serious undergrad. A lot of you are about the same age that I was when I took that picture, with a tripod and a timer because there's no like selfie camera back in the day. I was so serious, and I was really diving into like, what does it mean to be biracial? What does it mean to feel like a misfit my whole life? I went to a private college with kids who had gone to private school their whole lives, with kids who had parents who had gone to the same college. I was the first in my family to graduate from college. On my dad's side, I was the first in my family to even go to college. I never felt like I fit in. Here's what happened in the last 15 years. It's not that I magically figured out how to fit in. I feel like over the last 15 years, I have come to terms with all of the different identities that I embrace, which means since that time, realizing that it's actually pretty incredible. It's a pretty incredible opportunity to be biracial and bicultural, to understand two worlds at the same time. During that time, I was out of the closet in the first picture, but then I actually went back in the closet. No, keep it back. And then realized, you know what? If I'm going to live this life, I have to be out, I have to be my true self. Came out of the closet again. During that time, I also had a baby, raised that baby on my own until he was 8 years old, and realized that being a single mom, that is actually one of the things that I'm most proud of ever, and that of all the work and all the projects that I do and all of the teaching that I've ever done, that in fact the most important work I have ever done in my life is to go on this journey as a single mom with my kid and to raise him just like I feel like now, to embrace all of the things that he is as well. And so, my message here today to you guys is that who you are is an asset, right? That where you come from is an asset. It's amazing that this festival is here to celebrate that, because I wish that I had gotten that message so much earlier in life. And before I leave, I just want to give you a couple of homework assignments, because I am a teacher at heart. You can use the hashtag Roll Call Project to join in the conversation, because this project is fueled by conversation. It's fueled by the voices of actual students and actual teachers who are living these numbers. So I invite you to join in the conversation. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram. And then number 2 is probably the harder one. It's been so powerful to actually sit and photograph and talk to people about who they are and where they come from, and then actually take their picture. It's so easy to post beautiful selfies online now, but it is such an intimate act to let somebody else take your picture, to actually hear somebody's story and then take their picture. I invite you to do that. Sit down with someone and hear their story, take their picture, let somebody take your picture, and then if you're feeling really brave, you could post it using the hashtag, and then we'll go ahead and share that as well. Thank you so much. Please stay in touch.